Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is David Greenwood, who's the author of two books, which is Overcoming Burnout-Real Life Strategies for Burnout Recovery and Prevention, as well as Overcoming Burnout. In addition to being an author, he has a podcast which is called Overcoming Distractions, which is based on his book. When David is not writing or podcasting, he's conducting both workshops for organizations as well as keynotes at various conferences on the subject of burnout, including career and caregiver burnout and a little adult ADHD. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. David's very impressive and extensive bio is located in our show notes for our listeners who want to look through and see everything he's been up to. But David, I would love to start off by having you share more with us about yourself and what you've been doing.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me. It's always great to chat with like-minded business people in our, especially in our state, Massachusetts here. So again, thank you. I I kind of juggle my time between uh, helping a handful of public relations clients because I ran a full-service PR firm for close to 20 years. Before that, I ran public relations for Special Olympics. So I worked from Massachusetts all the way to projects around the world, China and everywhere else. Um, and then I went back out on my own, but I still have a handful of public relations clients that I love to work with. Some of them I've been working with for a dozen years or more. But I also had the opportunity to write a couple books. I was introduced to a publisher that was owned by Barnes and Noble years ago, which published my first book, Overcoming Distractions. It was an interesting experience because I'd never published a book before. There was a miscommunication about the deadline. And for somebody with ADHD who had to write a book in probably less than 2 months, was quite a challenge. So, but there's some lessons in there. It shows that we can actually do things. And then back a few years ago, I wrote Overcoming Burnout, and that was more geared towards career burnout, people who just were in a place that they were in a demanding career, they had demanding personal lives, and they just couldn't juggle it all. And, we can get into it, but a lot of people throw the term burnout around very loosely, like, oh, I'm burnt out. I'm burnt out. I went for a long weekend. I'm great now. There's a difference between stress and burnout. And that's a lot of what I talk to now with private organizations, some keynotes as well about the topic of burnout. And I really dig into the complexity of it. And you had mentioned also caregiver burnout. That is becoming a lot more on our radar because we've got more people of retirement age than we've ever had in our history. So a lot more people, even younger people, are assuming caregiver responsibility. So some of those people are even tired before they even get to work in the morning. So
Mhm.
that's why we talk about caregiver burnout as well.
Yeah, and I think it's really wonderful that you do focus on caregiver burnout because I feel like, or as one of your specialties, because I feel like it's something that not everyone always thinks of. I think when people think of burnout, they probably likely focus more on careers and stuff like that. But like you said, it's very important, especially now with what they call, what is it, the sandwich generation of people who are taking care of parents and kids. It's a lot to juggle. So I think what you do with that specifically is really impactful for people who are going through it.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I've done a number of presentations to people in the financial services industry, financial advisors. Some of them are called financial therapists or financial transitionists. And those are the people that are working with clients that may need to or want to make a significant change in their life. And that can be, I'm tired of my career. I want to do something else. I've decided I want to move my family to Arizona. Can I do it? But they want to know more about burnout because they're having more and more people come to them and saying, I can't do this job anymore. I need to learn a new career. Can I financially do it? And it's
Mhm.
important for those financial advisors to understand what that person is going through and what they need to do to actually recover from burnout. So it's very important. And it's also helpful for them as well to understand burnout so they don't burn themselves out. So
Definitely. And did you personally experienced burnout, whether it was career, caregiver, or both that led you into this work. I'm curious to hear kind of how you got started in this space.
Yeah, that's why I wrote the book, because I was it was right after COVID, like many people who were uh, had kids doing school at the dining room table, the businesses, losing clients, businesses being shut down. Everybody experienced some level of stress when it came to COVID. Some businesses exploded, like the mask business and those types of things,
Yeah.
takeout food, takeout containers, but for many people, including myself, I was still running my a variation of my PR firm, and it got very complicated. You couldn't go into businesses, say, to do video shoots. You couldn't do certain things. Some clients just said, I just lost a ton of money, sorry, you're out of here.
Hmm.
So I was trying to run a business. I had a son starting a new school at the dining room table, and some other things going on. And I said to my wife one day, I'm like, man, I feel burnt out. And I was kind of casually saying that. What I didn't realize is I was actually burnt out, because it was years of and I think because you're in the kind of marketing and PR and social space, that many of us in the marketing and PR world have had to pivot and pivot and pivot. I didn't really, I didn't have a super passion for social media. So I know some of you do, okay? But I didn't at the time. I was a media relations guy. I was the guy that put the CEO or the executive in the TV studio to do commentary, those types of things. But with the invention of social media, which took a bite out of traditional PR, it took a bite out of traditional media's revenue, because now people were putting revenue. The public relations industry was changing, and we were trying to pivot. And because I didn't want to focus on social media, we decided to take a slice of it. So we did a lot of video marketing, which was very effective. But in those beginning years, you were still doing traditional media. You were helping people write blogs or articles. You were doing video. You were maybe writing their email newsletter. All these things. Then every 2 weeks, a new social media platform would come. Those were the times where there was like 15, 20 different things and the clients would be like, oh, let's set up an account here. Let's set up an account here. Nobody knew what they were doing. And
Right.
it just got exhausting pivoting after a while. I mean, that's the other thing that people don't understand about burnout is change. Some people don't like change. And when people are in an industry that is constantly and rapidly changing, that can exhaust people as well. So
Yeah.
so I burned out. I will I will I will go way back, uh close to 30 years, when I owned a restaurant, which was my initial experience with burnout. I didn't know it was burnout. I just knew I was exhausted. My body was suffering, and I decided I couldn't work in the restaurant business anymore, and I sold my restaurant, and that's how I got into PR.
Hmm.
So I think I've probably experienced burnout in a couple different times in my life.
Yeah, and I think that you taking all the experience that you've had with it and what you've learned along the way and being able to talk about it with other professionals and caregivers is huge. So that way they can kind of take those preventative measures moving forward so that they hopefully don't find themselves in that same position as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, because some of them just don't know where to turn, or
Hmm.
they don't take or understand, because they hate to say it, but kind of backed in a corner, so to speak. They
Yeah.
don't know. For example, I'm a firm believer that we are co-founders of our burnout. There is equal distribution of what caused you to feel burned out, and that can even be caregiving.
Hmm.
And I hate the word boundaries, because it's been overused so much. We got to pull out the thesaurus to kind of figure out a new, maybe it's a line in the sand or what have you. But often people don't take control of what they can, and they just live in response mode. Again, whether you're in a demanding career, you're working in an organization that has a toxic workplace, toxic culture, or you're in a caregiving role and you don't know how to take control of what you can.
Hmm.
And when you do, that's really the beginning of getting out of burnout, is realizing that you actually can control things. And you don't have to live in that response mode, but it takes a lot to figure that out.
Yes, absolutely. And I read somewhere, I forget where I read this, but I read somewhere that burnout also just doesn't happen overnight. It can come throughout the span of like even a few years. It can be years before you finally realize like something isn't quite right here before it finally hits you that something is going on and it's time to address it.
That's true. I'm I'm in the camp that burnout shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's
Mm,
just like I woke up one day when I was burnt out. Well, if you actually sat down and thought about it, you'd realize that the things that have been happening for the months and years prior were a breeding ground for you getting burned out. So
yeah.
maybe you're surprised, but you really shouldn't be if you actually thought and unpacked it,
Yeah.
because you've probably been, take a career burnout, for example. You've probably been working in some mode that for could be years, that finally caught up with you. And
Hmm.
if you say, you know what, yeah, you're right. I was the first one in the office. I was the last one. I always had to prove myself to my boss or the CEO. I always had to go on the business trips and get the red eye back at 3 a.m. and then get back in the office. And I did this and I went in the weekends and all these things. And oh yeah, my boss is a jerk and I put up with his toxicity. Then you unpack that and you realize, huh, you know what? That's not a surprise at all.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And one thing I'm curious about too is if there's a crossover between people who have ADHD and face burnout. I wonder if there's any type of correlation there, knowing that you have really wonderful expertise in both subjects.
There's huge,
Yeah.
huge, huge crossover. Absolutely. I think people who have ADHD can get to burnout faster and even harder
Mm,
because of the ways we work, the habits we have, the ADHD kind of things we do or don't do. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
hmm.
if you're a habitual procrastinator and you have ADHD and you're always working on deadline, or you're always getting yelled at by a client or a boss, or you're always stressed out, you're waking up at 3 in the morning with that gasping your breath because, oh my God, I forgot to
Yeah.
do this for my client. And, over and over again, those ADHD things we do or don't do absolutely contributes to burnout. Some say that ADHD and even autistic burnout is different than, I don't know, your garden variety burnout. I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but what I do agree with is that we can experience it a lot harder and it maybe even excuse me, more difficult for us to get out of it.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I know one thing that you talk about too through the workshops and presentations that you do is specifically adult ADHD. And something that I've been seeing in some friends and other colleagues that I have is them finding out that they have ADHD as an adult when they're in their 30s and beyond. And just hearing them talk about the challenges that they've faced with that, finding out about it later in life. And I'm curious to hear about just advice you might have about that as someone's kind of navigating that as they find out about this diagnosis or what they're kind of going through in this new journey, so to say.
I mean, yeah, that's one of the biggest myths out there about ADHD is it is just kids and you grow out of it and you don't. If you're a kid with ADHD or an adult with ADHD, maybe you developed coping mechanisms, maybe you matured a little bit, maybe you're in a great job and the ADHD doesn't bother you, or maybe your ADHD is an asset. I won't go as
Hmm.
far as to say a superpower, um but yeah, and especially women can get diagnosed in their 40s and 50s. I've talked to countless women over the years that got diagnosed later in life. Maybe they took their son or daughter into the doctor, and then the doctor said, "Hey, you know what? Maybe you should go get tested." Um, and one of the big reasons I say is because the boys were ripping apart the classroom when we were younger. The girls were staring out the window. They didn't exhibit the hyperactivity, so they never got the attention that they deserved. Maybe they even did well in school. And that is a surprise to many women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that they actually do have ADHD. So,
Hmm.
um, but I work with a number of people individually just because of my podcast and the books, and people contact me because they are that busy professional with ADHD. I don't work with kids or college kids or teenagers, or I'm working with everybody from a PhD level down to a small business or a sole proprietor that just, as I like to say, we work on the mechanics of the ADHD. I'm not a therapist. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been self-employed, except for my time at Special Olympics, for pretty much my entire adult life. I had to navigate being self-employed and building, growing, maintaining a business with ADHD. And
Hmm.
there were many assets I had uh, that contributed to business success in one way or another, but I still had to navigate the time management, the energy management, the procrastination, all the things that come with that. So I like to say that I work on the mechanics with people, and a lot of them come to me. Actually, most come to me probably too late, and they actually are burned out.
Mm. Yeah. And so when someone gets into that place where you mentioned they might be too late and they are facing burnout, what advice would you have for them? Knowing that, of course, it would depend on them and their situation, but is there anything that you would recommend to someone who might be in that position today?
I think they need a massive dose of self awareness.
Mm.
I don't think it's one thing. I am more than willing to say that I would have I if I wrote my first book today, I would completely rewrite it, because we did write.
Interesting.
I did write a lot about the mechanics and time management and tools and techniques and proven strategies to navigate the world as a busy entrepreneur or adult with ADHD. I did not spend enough time on self awareness. And you got to own it. It's just,
Yeah.
it is what it is. You have to own it. You have to understand that I do these certain things. I do procrastinate. You have to understand procrastination. You have to understand why your schedule week after week is a complete mess. You have to understand when you can do good work and when you can't do good work, when you have energy levels, all these things. As an entrepreneur with ADHD, you've got to learn how to do those same things, but you've also got to learn how to lead with ADHD, which can be challenging for some people. There are people I've worked with that are working on massive projects that they're already challenged with managing their own to-do list or their projects or tasks or time. And now their projects rely on other people. So not only do they have to um, own their own habits, but they've got to be proactive with other people. So when they actually sit down to do the work, they have what they need.
Hmm.
So it can be challenging for many people.
Yeah. And that's I think is definitely one of the benefits of working with a professional like yourself to help them navigate it. And if they don't even know where to start, someone like you could help kind of point them in the right direction and give them the tools and resources they need to be successful and manage it in a way that feels good to them.
Well, we problem solve. So
Mm.
um, we we start out. I meet people where they are. I don't have a program. People ask, "What's your program?" I don't have a program. I have maybe 20 questions I ask a new person that wants to come on and work with me. I'm not even sure I call myself a coach. We problem solve. I'm more of a mentor than anything. But
Mm.
some of the first questions are, what are the biggest challenges? What are you frustrated with? What are you complaining about day after day? And that's not to sit there and have a complaint session. It's to, if you're complaining about, I don't care if you have ADHD or not, if you're complaining about something in your business day after day, that thing needs to be addressed.
Hmm.
So those are kind of the things that we laser focus on. But there may be more reasons why somebody cannot manage their time or energy properly. Maybe they're in a job where there are multiple meetings during the week. There are some of those things you can't change. I mean, I like to
Hmm.
have, for example, for me, I love to have an entire day, no meetings, no commitments, no anything, because I can get a ton of work done. Some people aren't that fortunate, so they got to learn how to. how to kind of bob and weave, as they say in boxing, and figure out how to navigate those things, because not everybody can control 100% of their time. So that's why I
Right.
say we've got to problem solve and
Hmm.
figure out when can you work, when can you get your best work done, when is your energy level, what happens when your kids are homesick, that all these things that this happen to all of us.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you walk them through those different scenarios and situations that might come up for them. So that way, like you said, with the things that they potentially can't control, they have the best steps or processes to follow from there.
Yeah, they're going to develop the process. I might suggest things, but
Hmm.
you find that, and again, I don't call myself a coach, but if somebody's going to coach or mentor somebody, it's typically they're not telling them what to do.
Hmm.
They've got to kind of figure out, will I make hard suggestions? Absolutely. Because sometimes they don't come up with it. And some people go, oh my God, that completely changed the way I work. But I'm not going to sit there and string them along for weeks and weeks until they finally come up with, that's just not, that's not cool either. So, but
Right.
I don't typically tell somebody what to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, without sharing any identifying information, I'm curious if you could talk about, I don't want to necessarily say like a success story, but just a really wonderful outcome that you helped one of your clients that you worked with through who was going through ADHD and just a really positive thing that came out of it.
I think one comes to mind was a gentleman who contacted me. Uh, he's probably close to 50 years old, that actually was put on a performance improvement plan from
Mhm.
his employer. Never happened before, but he had changed jobs and he went to a new job, and circumstances were different. The demands were different. So we worked together for several months just to completely redo the way he worked. Um, and what made the difference was that he was motivated, not so much by fear, but by saying, I know I can do better. I know that the way I'm working doesn't work properly. The way I'm communicating with, whether it's clients or coworkers or my supervisor, wasn't working.
Mhm.
I don't have a routine. I don't have agency over my day, those types of things. I don't have a game plan. I get out of the house late. I show up to work late because I don't have a routine. I don't have a home base in my home where like I'm running around the house every morning looking for something. So we buttoned up a lot of that. And I think I worked with him for 4 or 5 months, but even halfway through that process, he was pulled off the performance improvement plan.
That's
But he did the
amazing.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we just worked together for a couple more months just to kind of button things up. Other people need somebody every week as more of an accountability person.
Hmm.
I hate that word, but they like to check in with somebody like me every week to go through. Like they'll give me their project list. We'll pull that apart. I take notes so I know, here's the things that you were going to try and get done, or get off the mark on this day. We meet the next week. How did you do? Did you kick some ass? Let's figure out what made it a good week. Did it turn into a dumpster fire? Let's do the same thing. Let's figure out what went wrong and figure out how we can correct course a little bit. So, um, but they're all different types of people that come to me. Some people that just need to like get their act together for a few months, and there's other people that have worked for me for a couple of years, worked with
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great that you kind of have all across the board of individuals that you've been able to work with and support in this really impactful and important work. And
Yeah.
one thing that I'm so inspired by with you is that you're very multi-passionate. I mean, you previously owned a restaurant, you do PR, you previously worked for Special Olympics, you help people with ADHD and burnout. And it makes me wonder, like, how do you juggle it all with when you have your hands in so many different places? I'm curious to hear how you, I don't want to say balance because I don't believe there's ever going to be an exact 50-50 balance, but kind of how you manage everything, so to say.
Um, Quite frankly, it's taken my own advice. It's
Mm,
I'm not good at like maybe meeting with a couple ADHD executive clients, and then that might be a couple hours, and then go shift to go work on a PR project. I mean, I have to do it sometimes, but I try to kind of segment my days. So I'm doing the mentorship work on certain days, and then I leave other days to do, like, I do a lot of ghostwriting for some clients.
Oh,
That's
nice.
kind of what it's come down to a lot of in terms of PR is more digital PR. But those take time, and I can't write like a half hour here or 20 minutes here. It doesn't I have to kind of get in the zone. So I try to segment those days. I like to call them theme days. And if
Hmm.
I can do this same type of work for an entire day, then that's where and I think a lot of other people find success in getting in that zone and achieving some flow. Because that's the way your brain is working. If you have to continue to switch the types of tasks that you do, that's where we kind of hit a brick wall. So that's kind of my simple street smart methodology of trying to um, tackle two types of businesses. Um,
Yeah.
when speaking comes up, I have to just adjust my schedule. For example, I'm doing a virtual conference next month in the financial advisor space. Um, I can't tell them when to run their conference, so I gotta adjust. I mean, the good news is I'm not going anywhere. It's probably no more than an hour of my time, so I can
Mhm.
adjust a little bit. But if I had to go, like last year, I did a keynote in Connecticut. Now that's going to require an overnight because I was the first speaker in the morning. Um, so that requires a little more adjusting.
Hmm. Yeah, I love the idea of theme days. And I feel like I'm the same as you. When I need to focus on a task, like I will sit there and work on it until it's done. I can't really do that start, stop type of stuff because it
Yeah,
just totally messes with workflow.
yeah, yeah. No, I don't like that either. I will say though that we also live in reality, and some of us do need to figure out how to get more flexible.
Hmm.
Stuff happens. I advise a lot of people that, okay, we button my schedule down. I'm gonna Mondays and Fridays, I'm not gonna do meetings, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm gonna do meeting, and I'm gonna do this type of work. But also things change, like projects may change at your business or your workplace. You have personal things that may change. So you've got to learn to kind of revisit your schedule every so often and make those tweaks to make sure that you can continue to uh, get what you need to get done, be fulfilled, and not get stressed out or burned out.
Yeah, that's a great point that you bring up of almost doing like an audit, it sounds like, of just reevaluating every few months or so and seeing what's working and what isn't working and what you could be doing differently or
Yeah,
what you could try that you're not currently trying. I think that's really a great piece of advice that people can take and apply.
yeah, yeah. No, it's anybody, ADD or not.
Yeah.
You have to continue to evaluate how you work.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And since you're an author of two books, I'm curious to hear what advice you would have for anyone listening who may want to write a book themselves one day, whether it's nonfiction or even something fiction. I would love to hear any tips or advice you have to share in that process.
Map it out in detail. Um, I suggest mapping it out in something that you can have on any device, like an
Mm,
Evernote or something like that, because you're going to be driving in the car and you're going to go, oh, that'd be a cool uh, person to interview, or subtopic of a chapter, or because you don't just sit down and say, here's the book, I'm going to write it. It's a
mhm,
process. So ideas are going to come and go. They're going to come and go at odd times. And that's the way I did it. I laid out books in Evernote. So if I was somewhere else and I had an idea, I could just fire up my phone and continue to add that. It also allowed me to keep a running list of, say, people I wanted to interview,
mhm,
those types of things. Um, and then you need to, at least for me, when I wrote my first book and the second one, I still had a healthy a book of PR clients. So what I did is I would clear the decks. I would get as much work as I possibly could get done, to the extent where I could actually take a week and just write, and I immersed myself in it.
Hmm.
I think that's important because you do get in a zone. And if you're going to write a book and you're going to put it down and you're going to go back to it 6 weeks later, your brain is going to have to start all over again. So once once you start the process, it's a good idea to kind of figure out how to maintain that consistency. Everybody's different. Some people say,
Hmm.
I'm going to write 1,000 words a day. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It you got to work with your brain, but
Hmm.
that's what I found to be the best approach was to uh, clear as much time so I could write for days on end. The other thing I did this a couple times, is I drove just far enough away and rented a hotel room where I didn't have the urge to drive back home, and I locked myself in a hotel room for a few days. So,
Yeah, I've heard of a few writers doing that, having like
yeah.
their own writers retreat, which I think is a great idea. I would love to write a book one day. So I always so interested in asking people how they've done it. And I think the advice that you shared about like batching your work ahead of time so that you can have like that week or so of uninterrupted time is great. Because sometimes it's like me after writing all day for work, I think, how could I possibly have the energy or interest in then writing again, but for myself? So I think that option or advice to just be able to take time off and dedicate it solely to your writing is a really good piece of advice.
Yeah. And however you do it, it's difficult to start it and then stop and then go back to it weeks
Hmm.
later because
Yeah.
you forget what you wrote. You have to, especially if you're in the middle of a chapter,
Hmm.
you have to pretty much recreate that all over again. So when you're in it and you have some flow, even if it's several days, you know where you are, you know where you left off. You're not repeating yourself in the book,
Hmm.
which is a real possibility if you put the thing down for several weeks.
Yes,
So
definitely.
yeah.
And as of the time of this recording, we're 2 months into 2025. So I'd love to hear any exciting things that you personally have coming up throughout the next year in your business or new things you might be working on.
No, you kind of heard it. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to focus more on the corporate work, the
Mm,
getting into um, companies that want to understand burnout, because it's gonna, especially with the caregiver piece. I think there's a perfect storm coming
mm,
where uh, companies are going to have to deal with the flexibility and the motions and everything else that comes with caregiving. You're going to have people showing up at the office tired. You're going to have people on your Zoom calls or your Teams meetings tired.
mm,
Um, and if you don't understand the complexity of this, you're just going to think they're, disengaged or slacking off, or they don't want to be there. So it's really important for companies to understand this, and the levels that or not the levels, but the complexity. I keep going back to that word of what can contribute to burnout.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
As we get closer towards the end of this episode, I love to ask our guests what their favorite local businesses are to support. So I'm curious to hear which places you love to frequent, shop at, support, all the things.
Um, I live in Hudson. They've gotten a lot of awards for their downtown, so there's a lot of cool restaurants in Hudson, Massachusetts. There's the Rail Trail. There's Welly's. Welly's has another one over next door in Marlboro. So those are some of our favorites. I just stopped in last week to Saffron, which is on the kind of Marlboro Northborough line, right on Route 20. Tremendous Indian food if you like Indian food. Dedicated family. The chef came out and talked to us about the food and the ingredients, and super, super nice guy. So those are, you could tell I love to eat, right? but um, but there's another little gem in Massachusetts in Plainville, and it's what's his name? Jeff Kinney's uh, bookstore there. The guy who
An
wrote
unlikely story?
Unlikely Story, yeah.
Yes.
Um, and that's just a gem. Occasionally he does some events there, so you can
Hmm.
meet him. But he's really put together a really cool bookstore. And next
Absolutely.
door is, I forget the name of it. It might be just Plainville House of Pizza, but some of the best pizza and subs I've ever had. So you can go to the bookstore, you can hang out, you can get a coffee in that cafe, and then you can go next door to grab a pizza or a sub. I mean, it's some of the best pizza around.
Ooh, amazing. I
Yeah.
love an unlikely story, so I haven't checked out the pizza place, so I have to do that next time I go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. David, this has been a really great episode, and I've appreciated having you on the show. And now I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can learn more about you in case they'd like to reach out and chat further.
For the PR business, it's davidagreenwood.com. So davidagreenwood.com. For more on the burnout workshops, they can go to overcomingburnout.net. It's just the name of the book, overcomingburnout.net. And they can search for Overcoming Distractions, the adult ADHD podcast, as they say, anywhere you find podcasts. There's 308 episodes. I do solo episodes where I kind of get down to some game plans for people where they can put into action. And then I've interviewed experts all over the world, from here to Australia, doctors, other authors and we kind of slice down the challenges that a busy adult with ADHD would have, such as um, perfectionism and imposter syndrome when it comes to people with ADHD, and just these other kind of kindness, just things that many people with ADHD struggle with.
Mm, awesome. I will link to all those places in the show notes that way our listeners can click through and see everything that you're up to. But thank you so much again for coming on today's show.
Great. Thanks for having me.